Well, welcome to the podcast, everybody. I'm Beck, your host, and today I have Zara with me from the Therapy Shed. Hey, Zara, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Oh, it's so nice to have you on here. Thanks for taking the time. Yeah, let's jump straight in and I guess let the listeners know a little bit about you and yeah, what you do.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a child, adolescent, adult, and family psychotherapist by training. And then somewhere along the way, I segued into kind of parenting support. I'm still not quite sure what I call myself because there's no degree in the kind of stuff that I do. But it's somewhere between being a parent myself and my experience as a parent and applying professional knowledge to that and being a prolific consumer of parenting guides. And so the Therapy Shed, my Instagram account, is all about offering practical strategies for parents to use with their children. At the moment, it's geared mainly towards preschool, but a little bit of adolescence as well. And then my day job is kind of play therapy and art therapy with kids or traditional talking therapies with adults.
Oh, that sounds awesome. And how long have you been doing that for?
I've been working with adults for nearly 10 years and with kids about 6 years now.
Yeah, fantastic. And what drew you to psychotherapy?
It was quite a long, a scenic route to get there. But my mum always says that everyone in our family is late developers, so it was probably appropriate. So I was teaching classes like Les Mills classes, like body pump and body attack and body balance, and I noticed that people were always kind of hanging around after a class to speak to me, and just offload on me. And I think it's because you just become this very consistently regular person in people's lives. And obviously, when you're teaching a class, you present the best version of yourself. And so people kind of can confide in you much like they do a therapist. And I was with a boyfriend who had a really good job and had just kind of gone like, well, my job's quite fun. And I guess he'll provide for our family and stuff. So I'll just, do this. And then we broke up and I suddenly thought, hang on, I used to be really ambitious. Where did all of that go? I don't want to just have a nice life. I want to have like an interesting life. And I'd always been really interested in psychotherapy, but because I'd come from a musical theatre background and then into fitness, I just thought I'm never going to be able to do something so academic. So I went and did like a 3-month foundation course and I just fell in love with it. And that way of listening to people and of trying to understand people's experiences and see the world as they do. And it was also kind of combined with this quite quite poignant moment in my life, I guess, where I was teaching a body balance class and they used the song, the Joni Mitchell song, A Case of You. And there's a line in it that says, remember the time you told me life was touching souls. And I just thought, oh, that's it. It's just about touching souls. And if I can do that one a day, whether it's smiling at someone on the street that really needed you to smile at them, or therapy or teaching a class, then actually I think that's my purpose in life. So that was my kind of long-winded way of getting there.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, good on you. And that's so true. Hey, like being in that space, I've been a PT for a long time. You are almost like a therapist when people come to see you. You're having deep conversations, and it's nice to be like, oh, okay, how can I upskill to serve these people and, be their support and listen to them and support them through the things that they're going through. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's very cool. And you're a mum of two yourself, two young ones. What's motherhood been like for you so far?
God, it is just a constant paradox. It's like it's just managing that polarity all day, every day. If I want to be so far away from my children, I also want to put both of them back inside me and never let them out. And it's so weird that loving them is the reward. It's not how much they love you. It is literally just the feeling you get of loving your children. And like when my daughter came along, so my daughter's 1 on Wednesday and my son is 5.5. And I said to my son yesterday, actually, I said to him, I said, how do you feel about your baby sister? And he said, she's just so cute. I just love her. And I said, what does love feel like in your body? And he said, feels like a baby cuddle. And I was like, oh, that is such a lovely description, isn't it? Like, doesn't love just feel like a squidgy baby cuddle? So yeah,
Totally.
it's been the biggest life lesson I've ever had. It's been the biggest journey of transformation for me and how much I've learned about myself in that process. Um, and yeah, I mean, just, it's a bit like childbirth. You kind of forget the bad stuff.
Yeah, you do, don't you? And you're absolutely right. It's this constant pull being like, I really want you in here. And then I just want to be like so far away from you. I like how you've described that. So I think every parent can totally relate to that.
Yeah.
But that's really cute that your child is so like kind of aware of how they feel and then how they can describe things. And it sounds like you just ask the right questions and they just can give it to you straight. It's like they know kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that it is just about asking those questions. Like I actually saw an adult client today who's going through a kind of tricky separation, and one of her kids was like, Mummy, Daddy says that you don't love him anymore and that you lie when you say you do. And
Mm.
I just kind of said, like, we were talking about what she might say, and I said, like, well, actually, instead of trying to tell him your side of things, or that daddy's wrong, or that this or that, why didn't you just ask him what it feels like to hear daddy say that? And that's kind of quite often what I do with my son is, instead of trying to fix the feeling immediately, just ask him to tell me what it's like. Because if you think about, as adults, when we have an issue and we go to our friend and tell them, like, oh, I'm really struggling with this thing, specifically, typically women, we don't want someone to say, like, oh, well, all you need to do is this. We just want someone to go, oh my God, that sounds hard. Tell me more.
Yep, absolutely. Just hold space for me so I can just blah, just
Mhm.
tell you how I feel, tell you what's going on. And sometimes just offloading and having that safe space with someone just feels you just feel so much better.
Yeah, and I think kids are the same, and we just forget that. And also, maybe not forget
Mm.
it, but our instinct as parents is, oh my God, my child's suffering, I must fix it. Instead of like, oh, let me just sit with them in this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's quite a challenge for a lot of us if we don't know how to. We haven't had parents who have done that for us as well. Um, so what like for you personally, what do you think's been the biggest challenge so far?
Um, Learning about patience,
Hmm.
selflessness, and regulating my own anger, because I came from a family where anger was definitely allowed, um, but it was quite explosive and was very much about just like shouting at each other to fuck off, and then
Hmm.
not speaking to each other for a day and then just moving on. Um, so learning how to kind of not explode, but actually sit with it and kind of, yeah, not let it become toxic. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think for me as well, I think the selfless part of it, because again, my family are kind of four people that orbit each other. Like, we come to each other when we need each other, but all in all, we are four very individual people. So having to
Mm.
always put somebody else first was very uncomfortable in my body. That grapple of like, why can't I just do this gracefully? Why do I feel so resentful of the fact that I have to sit here?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think anger's is quite a big one. If you don't quite know how to regulate that or sort of channel that energy without it like just projecting it out onto somebody else, it's yeah, can create a bit of conflict in the
Yeah,
family, that's for sure.
exactly.
But
Yeah, it being something that you always have to get rid of rather than being able to sit with. And it kind of started for me when, before I had kids, in therapy, I remember talking about the anger I felt when I would get stuck in traffic, and that
mhm.
process of learning to kind of sit in traffic and go, well, I guess this is where I am, and not be seething at how slowly it was going.
I can think we can all relate to that. It's just like you get fidgety, get a bit of rage build up. You're like, oh my God, I just need to like be somewhere. And it's almost like a conscious practice to do that, isn't it? You're like, okay, I'm here. Like, what are the techniques I can do in this moment to just like regulate that a little bit and not let it take over and take it out into someone else in front of me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I used to have terrible road rage, terrible.
Don't worry, you're not alone, right? You're not alone there. Um, but yes, coming back to parenting, it can absolutely be challenging at times. Kids can push our buttons. We can feel really triggered, lose our cool. Um, how can we respond better, not be so reactive, like react less, be able to respond, especially when our kids are throwing a tantrum or being difficult, whether they're young or even at older age, like teenagers kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one because the more I work with parents, the more I think actually the first thing that I do isn't give you strategies for dealing with your children's behavior. It's actually strategies for dealing with how you feel about your children's behavior. So I think practicing, you have to practice the skills you need in moments of calm so that they're available in moments of chaos. So I think having like little mantras that you say to yourself and breathing techniques are great, but you have to practice them when you don't need them. So for me, it's definitely things like taking a couple of deep breaths, because it's very rare that it's an emergency. Normally, if your child is screaming because you've asked them to go and put their shoes on, that's okay. And I think especially, if you're going to be late for something, if you're already going to be 5 minutes late, just be 15 minutes late and calm. Why be 10 minutes late and stressed? Just if you're already late, just give in, you're late. And then, take some deep breaths and then ask yourself, like, what's the next best thing I can do? Or like, what are the words that I need to hear? So do I need to remind myself that I'm a good parent and I have a good child? Do I need to remind myself that this will pass? Do I need to remind myself that we're on the same team? And just think about what are the words that you need to hear as a parent before you start to even think about approaching your child. And then one of my favorite ones with kids is to think about, do I feel empathy? Because often, like my son, like if he's on his scooter, he might fall off that thing 1,000 times. And by the 90th time, when he's gone, let me show you a trick, and failed at the trick, all I want to say is, you can't do tricks. Like, you're just not good. You can't do tricks. But obviously I can't. So having to ask myself, like, do I feel empathy? And sometimes it's like, no, really, really not. And it's all right. What do I need to do to feel empathy? Or if I'm not feeling empathy, what can I do to help him? So like with my son, like on this one day where he just fell off so many times, I just had no empathy. I was like, I really don't feel bad for you that you've fallen. It's just really annoying me now. So I said nothing, and I just knelt down and offered him my body. It's like, you can lean on me, you can cry. You have no idea that inside I'm thinking, like, whatever. Like, so those, I think, always start with yourself. Always start with yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what do you think it is we're getting so angry and so stressed because we are late? Like, why can't we just go, oh, look, it's not a big deal? Like, is that like a role model thing, or just something that just like, what's happening there?
Yeah. So I think, obviously when we're stressed, we start to release stress hormones, which make us more likely to be clumsy and stuff like that, which makes everything take longer. I think also, children, they feed off that energy. So if you're rushing a child, they go into fight, flight, or freeze. So they will either literally freeze and do nothing, run away from you, or fight you on it. And when my daughter was born, my son had only been at school for like a week and a half when my daughter was born. And I was like, Jesus, these are two huge changes. And I saw these parents like dragging their kids in saying, I told you we were going to be late. And I thought to myself, like, why are you blaming your child? It's your fault. And it was one of those posts I did on Instagram where I thought, is everyone going to have a go at me for shaming parents? But then I thought, actually, I don't care. And I did a post on like, it's not your child's fault for being late, or stop blaming your child for being late, because I just saw those kids and I thought to myself, I'm never going to do that to my son. Because especially with starting school, I think about, kids, like there's two analogies and you kind of have to see which one resonates. But either I think of a child as like a battery that gets drained throughout the day, or a can of Coke that gets fizzed up throughout the day. And my son's very much more the battery. And I just think, I'm not going to send him to school already drained. I'm going to send him in fully charged. And that means I get up before him, I get dressed before him, I dress the baby, I feed the baby, I make sure all of his stuff is ready the night before, so that when he wakes up, all I have to do is be with him. And then he has a little bit of TV. Then I make sure that we have minimum 10 minutes, but ideally 20 to 40 minutes of time where I just focus on him. We might play Uno or do something tactile, sensory, like Play-Doh or kinetic sand. But I just make sure that he's had really good connection time. And then and I tell him 20 minutes before we actually need to leave that it's time to go. Because that means when he says, I want to change my socks, or can I show you this thing, or can I make another paper airplane? I can be like, sure. because it's just not fair on him. So I think that it's so much to do with, I think that feeling of rushing, and what happens as a parent is probably because you only have yourself to blame. And that's really irritating when you can't be angry at someone else. So then you blame your child because you can't bear to go, it's completely my fault. And actually that would be a great thing to say to your kid,
Yes.
you know what, I'm really sorry. I should have got everything sorted earlier and I haven't. So can we be a team and try and get out of the door on time instead of just fighting them on it?
Yeah. Oh, I really love that because you're still, I think, maintaining a really positive connection with that in that moment before you have to leave them for 6 hours. Like sometimes they're doing all those things because they just kind of want to be with you that little bit longer before they get to school. Um, and I really love that you said that, you know, you got to do that work yourself and be prepared, do all those things in the morning, like get up that bit earlier if you need to, and practicing all that stuff, like you say, in calm, like when you're in a chilled state. So when you hit this moment of stress or the kids are triggering or whatever, you've got those tools and you can, oh, okay, this is what I can do now. Let's stay calm, let's get organized together. Like you say, be a team and then like get to school. That's a really good way to look at it. Yeah, I really love that. Well said.
Thanks.
Um, so just touching on that again, you mentioned the breathing and stuff like that, but how can we in general be calmer parents? Is it that we do practice that stuff more when we're in a really good state, like doing a yoga, going walking, breathing? Like, are those the kind of main things that you would recommend that we do?
Yeah, I think you know, in an ideal world, everyone would just have therapy, because I think if you know, it's when people say things like, you know, my kid really pushes my buttons, it's like, well, actually, you know, should you have buttons for them to push so easily? Is it their fault, or
Mm,
is it, you know, your responsibility to do some work? So I think therapy would be the gold standard. Um, and then I think it's just about having those moments of self-reflection. So like another example is me and my husband take it in turns in who puts which kid to sleep. And normally my daughter was the quicker one to go to sleep. So whenever you're on her, you're like, great, I'm going to be out of here half an hour before I would be. And I was sitting there with her and like she was just taking so long to fall asleep. And she wasn't crying. There was nothing bad going on. But I just found myself getting so frustrated. And so I
mm,
like literally put her down. I went and sat on the bathroom floor and I was like, what is going on? Why am I so frustrated? Because nothing's happening. And I was
mm.
like, you know what? It's because I've nearly finished Maths Australia season 8. And I
And
really
I just
thought
want
by
to
this
go and
point
watch
in
it.
my, you know, I thought by this point in my evening, I would be sitting and watching it. And I'm resentful that I'm not. And as soon as I identified why I was feeling it, it became more manageable. And then I was like, right, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to hold her. She will fall asleep eventually. I will be watching Maths Australia eventually. And like, it was just immediately so much easier. So I think just having that moment to ask yourself, what is going on with me? So like when your kid, it's always bedtime, isn't it? When your kid emerges from their
Yes.
bedroom for the time and you go, why aren't you asleep? That's not really what your question is. Your question is, I'm frustrated that I don't have this time for myself because actually I've waited all day for it. Um,
Hmm.
and
Exactly.
if you know exactly where your reaction comes from, then you're just way more likely to say something helpful, like, I know why you're out of your bed, you know, which is like, or to actually say, let me help you back to your bed, instead of just kind of giving your child all of your resentment and then inevitably delaying bedtime.
Yeah, absolutely. I can relate to that scenario 100%. I could just find my husband and I'm like, okay, we need to tag you out. You're getting frustrated. I'll go in. You go over there. And it is the same thing. We're like, oh, we just want to have a bit of time to ourselves. We want to go watch Emily in Paris or like whatever it is on TV.
Yes, I'm so into Emily in Paris at the moment, although it
It's so
really
good.
annoys me how everything works out so well for her all
I
the
know.
time.
What the hell? That's not real life.
And every time she even looks at a man, it's like, oh, I wonder where this is going.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I was like, when I was watching it actually, and I was like, Darren Star made this. Where do I know that name? And then I looked up and he made Sex in the City. I was like, oh, now it all makes sense. Okay.
Yes, now it all makes sense. I love
Yeah.
Sex in the City. Oh, that's my jam.
I
Love it.
remember
Love that show.
Sex in the City and Friends finished on the same night here. And it was like one of the saddest nights of my life. I cried so much.
No way, on the same day.
Yeah, like one after the other. It was brutal.
Dare they? What were they thinking? That is not cool. That doesn't work for us. What?
No, no.
Oh my God, I
I
love it.
think
Well,
like, you know,
I'm pretty sure every parent listening can relate to the whole bedtime thing. So thank you for sharing
yeah.
that. Yeah, and I think I try and remind myself too. I'm like, you know what? It might take an extra 10, 15 minutes, but so what? Like, what is that? Like, I'll probably have this for another 5 years and then she won't want to, she'll be pushing me out the bedroom. Mum, get out. Don't need you anymore. And I'll be like, oh.
Yeah, exactly. So like with my baby, I was like, I'm going to close my eyes. I'm going to take 20 deep breaths. And when I open my eyes, even if she's still awake, I'll definitely feel better because I've taken 20 deep breaths. And most of the time when I do it, she's asleep by that point because I've been calm. And then I look at her and think, oh my God, look at my squidgy little baby. He's probably going to be awake in an hour. But right now, I think, oh my God, I'm so lucky to have this little baby. And this is the last time I'm going to do the baby bit because she's the last one. So I think,
Mm-hmm.
breathing techniques and anything you can build into daily life. But I think the other thing is if you're in a kind of tricky point at the moment where let's say your kid is always taking ages at bedtime, obviously there's things
Mm.
you can do about that. But if you find yourself feeling more resentful because you were really looking forward to something, if you can try and find another time in the day to have that thing you're looking forward to, then it just kind of takes the edge off that resentment a bit.
Oh, yeah, that's true. So you're still getting that little bit of time for you. And I think that makes a difference. Hey, like even just trying to get my exercise in early in the day, I'm like such a better person throughout the whole day, knowing towards the end of bedtime, I'm like, oh, I've already done that. And I've done some reading, or yeah, the 20 minutes of chill during the day. I like do my deep breathing as well, a little meditation, whatever. And by the end of the night, I'm a lot more calmer. And some
Yeah.
nights I'm like, what's going on here?
Yeah, exactly. At the moment, my daughter's going through a bit of a sleep leap thing, so it's horrible. But she was reliably
Mm.
sleeping until about 6. And so I was like 2 or 3 days a week. I was getting up at 10 to 5, so I could be on the Peloton at 5 and like done by the time they wake up. And sometimes they'd both sleep till like 6:30, 6:45. And I'd be like, oh my God, this is amazing. Not only have I trained, I've showered, I've had coffee, watched a bit of maths. And like it's just, yeah, and like if I did it every day, it would make me feel really tired and it wouldn't be
Yes.
beneficial. But
Hmm.
a couple of days a week, you have that moment where your alarm goes off where you think, oh my God, I could go back to sleep. And then I just think I will think about how you feel once it's done. And that feeling of having done your exercise by 6 a.m., like it's worth it for me every time.
Oh, absolutely. And it's key to sort of envision that, like how you will feel after, not that, oh, I got to get out of bed. Like it's like, hang on, it's only X amount of minutes. Like, how am I going to feel after that? I'm going to feel gold. I'm going to have more energy and I'll be a much happier parent. I'll much better with my kids. Like, that's a win.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a question I'm sure everyone's thinking while they're listening to this is like, threatening our kids. I think sometimes it just happens and we all do it. I'm totally guilty of this. But if we are threatening our kids to stop them from doing things, or we want them to do something, what impact is that having on them? And what can we do instead?
Hmm. So when we threaten kids, what we risk is them not knowing when to believe us. So typically things
Mm,
like when you're in an airplane, if you don't sit down, the pilot's going to land the plane. That's a massive amount of power to put on a small kid. And they don't know,
mm,
it's like the things our parents used to say to us, like if you pull that face and the wind changes, it'll get stuck. You don't know what your kid is going to believe. So I think,
yeah.
you want your child to know that you always mean what you say. Um, and yes, we are all guilty of sometimes saying stupid things. I remember once I was about to get the train somewhere with my son. It was a really long journey. We're going to his grandma's house on the other side of London. And like we'd only done like the first bus journey and he was annoying me. And I was like, look, we're just going to turn around and go home. And I thought to myself, there's no way we're turning around and going home because we have to go there. And so then I was like, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean that. What I meant was we have a really long journey and it will be way more fun if we work as a team. So can you be my teammate? And he was like, yeah. And it was so much better. So I think that's the first thing is if you've made the threat, don't think, well, now I have to stick to it. Similarly, I got asked the other
Mm,
day, he said, I give my daughter pocket money and she was really rude to me. So I said to her, no pocket money for 3 months. And she's like, 5. And he was like, do you think I was too harsh? And I was like, no, but I just don't think she's going to learn anything because by three
she's
months' time,
5.
she's going to have forgotten that she ever had pocket money, let alone what it was related to. And actually, have you taught her how to not be rude? No. So it's completely redundant. Like you've literally just shown her that you're really unreasonable, and that's it. So I think it's all about making sure that the consequence fits the crime. So I always think about why is my child doing what they're doing? What do I wish they would do instead? And then how can I teach them that? So why, what, and how? So like my teenager is being really rude to me. Why are they speaking to me this way? Because they're stressed out about exams and they're a teenager and so they're feeling pissy. Okay, what would I rather they did? I'd rather they took a breath and then found a way to share what they need. How can I do that? Well, I can say that to them like, okay, look, I hear that you're really pissed off. It's not okay to speak to me that way. So take your time. And when you're ready to come and ask me for whatever it is you need so that I can help you, I'm all ears. That is so much more effective than if you speak to me that way, you don't get the iPad for a week. Because again, what does that teach them? So
Yeah.
I think the other thing is when, again, like, you know, I kind of straddle two lines. Sometimes we have to parent the child that's in front of us, and sometimes we have to parent based on things we want for the future. And, you know, as a
Mm.
parent of kind of a toddler or a small kid, don't you want to build a relationship whereby your child thinks, if they're in a tricky spot as a teenager, they don't think, oh my God, something awful's happened. I can't tell my mum, she'll be so angry. Don't you want them to think, oh my God, something awful's happened. I have to tell my mum. So
Mm.
when your consequences are really ridiculous, as teenagers, they start to get better at lying because they want to avoid your unreasonable consequences. Whereas if your consequences are fair, and you know,
Mm.
consequences don't have to mean punishment, they don't have to suffer in order to learn. So, you know, my son had a
Mm.
balloon toy thing, he was, you know, predictably whacking it on everything, and it popped. And I didn't go like, well, that's what happens when you don't listen to me and blah blah blah. I was like, oh, I'm really sorry your balloon popped, that's rubbish. And I'd feel really sad about that too, you know, because he's got the natural consequence of it. He doesn't need me to add anything to that. Or if he spills something, I'm like, okay,
Mm.
well, you have to help me clean it up. Not, oh my God, you're so clumsy. Like, why do I need to shame him? Like, it's just something that
Yes,
happens. And, you know, if we think about it, if like, you know, as adults, if you're sitting there having coffee with your friend and she dropped her phone and the screen smashed, you wouldn't be like, well, that's what happens when you're clumsy. I told you, you'd be like, oh no, you know, it's weird the way we treat children differently. So I just think about
that's
what do you
true.
want to
Mm.
teach them, and that you're on the same team. You know, your job as a parent is to raise a good human, show them what a
Mhm.
good human looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. You just fully nailed that on their head. Love that the way you've explained that. Um, yeah, I just like raising good humans and kind humans, and you want them to like how would you? Yeah, like you said, how would you treat your friend? Would you treat your friend like that? Like, or if you, how would you like it if you were treated that way, and how would you feel? I think it's just like putting yourself in their shoes a little bit and go, oh, okay, well, that's not very effective, and that's not going to get us anywhere. That's a really
Yeah,
good way
exactly.
to look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And like
yeah.
Sarah Ockwell Smith, she wrote the kind of original gentle parenting book. And I don't subscribe to the word gentle parenting because it gets conflated with permissive parenting. I think much more about intentional or respectful, or I mean, you know, ideally it should just be called parenting. Um, but she talks about childism and about treating children differently based on the fact that they're a child. And I think that's always
Mm.
a really great way to start from. Like, am I speaking to my child in this way because they are smaller than me? And would I speak
Mm.
to someone else or allow someone else to speak to me this way?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think I noticed in one of your posts something about like their brain development at particular ages, especially when they are like really young. It's like
Mm.
they're not going to quite, you can't teach past their brain development either. So if you're saying all this stuff, they're not quite going to get it either,
Yeah,
are they?
exactly. So,
So,
yeah, it was a friend of mine was messaging me about she was having a tricky time with her son, and she was like, oh, you know, I guess I could have done things better. I could have done this. I could have preempted this. I could have predicted that. And I was like, you can't outparent brain development, you know, like you can do all the right
mm,
things. And it's the message I get sent most often on Instagram is my 3-year-old keeps hitting me. I've tried everything. And I'm like, right, did you think that by doing everything there was one of these was magic and would stop your 3-year-old from hitting? Because that's not what success looks like. And so often when I work with parents, I start with, tell me what managing looks like. Because if you think managing your toddler's meltdowns is them not having them, then I can't help you. If you think
mm,
managing them is I'm not going to escalate them, I'm going to learn how to stay calm with them, I'm going to teach them the skills that they need so when their brains are more developed, they have those tools available, then I'm your girl. And
yes.
yeah, we can't outparent brain development. You know, it's like with babies' sleep. Like my daughter's
Mm,
was really good, like was sleeping really nicely, and the last 3 weeks her sleep's been awful. It's nothing to do with
mm,
what I did. It's just her brain's going through something, and I have to ride it out.
mhm. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's oh yeah, that's awesome. And if you just be a little bit like kinder to yourself too, because I think I've been in that same situation with my youngest one. She's a bit of a hitter, and I'm like, oh my God, what's going on here? But I'm like literally trying not to let that make me angry or threat or whatever. I'm like, okay, it's time to use my tools now. It's almost like you're reparenting yourself as you're parenting your own child, practicing all of
Absolutely.
that, and being like, okay, I see you doing that. I'm just going to step back because mummy, I don't want you to hit mummy. Like, but when you've taken a breath or you need a moment, I'll be here and I'll actually drop down to their level and arms open, and then she'll eventually just come in and hug and cry, and I'll just like sit with her, but
Yeah.
that took a lot of practice myself because that's not what I got when I was a child. But it's like
No, and
I'm
it
making a conscious effort to change, like, yeah, how I'm raising my own
yeah,
kids.
and well done you, because it's not easy. That process of reparenting is real and it's hard. Actually, I recently
Mm-hmm.
had a session with some parents from China, and they were like, we were raised by old school Chinese parents. They hit us and we
Mm-hmm.
were silent. So we don't know what you're supposed like we know we're not allowed to do those things now, but we don't know what we're supposed to do instead. And quite often,
Mm.
sometimes I think about, when we go back to those words that you can say to yourself as a parent, quite often the words that I'll say to my son might be the words that I need to hear. So, um, especially with something like anger, is I say to him, like, you're safe, your anger doesn't scare me, because
Mm.
it doesn't matter if it's, obviously there's a difference, but if a grown up is attacking you, or this tiny person that you love more than anything in the world is attacking you, the same thing happens in your brain. You still get that fight, flight, freeze response where you get adrenaline, where you want to defend yourself, where you want to fight back. And you have to
Mm-hmm.
suppress all of that. And there's this energy that doesn't have anywhere to go. So actually, sometimes saying to your kid, like, you're safe, your anger doesn't scare me, is actually for you. You're saying, like, I'm safe. Anger isn't anything to be afraid of.
Yeah. Oh wow, that's a good way to put it and understand it. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. So if our child or my child is anxious in any way, what could I say to them, or how could I support them?
Anxiety is a really interesting one. And I always kind of think I do myself out of a job, because very often parents will contact me because they have anxious children. So
Mm,
I think firstly we have to think about anxiety as an adult. Do you feel anxious about your child's anxiety? And just like something very simple about, instead of saying like I'm anxious or my child's anxious, like there is anxiety here. Put some space between you and that label. You are not
yes.
anxiety. You just
Like I'm
experience a bit of,
feeling.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And like a little bit of anxiety is a good thing. It stops us crossing roads with our eyes shut. We need a bit of it. It helps us. Sometimes it's there
Yep.
because it tells us that something really matters to us. Also not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
Typically with children, what happens is when they feel anxious, as parents, we want to take away all of that anxiety. And then we teach them anxiety is something you should be afraid of. Let me rescue you from it.
Mm,
Instead of
mm,
anxiety can be useful and we can live alongside it. So, typically with things like separation anxiety, so when children struggle to be dropped off, my son's one of them. And like, let me preface this with, it pulls my insides out. I hate leaving him crying. I can't bear it.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
I know that for some children, crying is part of how they separate. I know that for children, crying is one of the first tools they have, and it's not always an accurate indicator of distress. I know that he is fine once he's there, and that he is learning how to feel anxious and miss me and still have a good time. And it's not about, I know you're anxious, but you'll have a lovely time, because that's saying once your anxiety's gone, then you'll have fun. It's, I know you're anxious and you can have a lovely time. You can miss me and be okay. You don't have to wait for one to go. So I think it's really important to think about, am I fueling my child's anxiety by trying to help them from it? The intention is absolutely a good one. I recognize that. But sometimes you
Mm-hmm.
inadvertently make it worse. So if you have a child that asks you loads of anxious questions, or they ask you the same question again and again, if you keep answering it, obviously you're not helping because they're still asking you. So obviously you take the edge off that feeling for a moment, and then they need you to do it again. So in those moments, sometimes the best thing you can say is, oh, there's that worried question again. I know feeling worried isn't nice. And that's it. Or if a child tells you about their worries, you can say, that sounds really hard. Thank you so much for telling me. I always want to hear how you feel. Instead of, let me fix it. Let's go and do a mindfulness body scan together.
It's just like acknowledging it, and they feel heard. They feel heard and
Mm,
acknowledged, and they're validated in their experience, really, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah. So if you're a very anxious parent yourself,
Mhm.
are they going to be vibing off that energy
Yeah, I think,
as well?
what children lack in comprehension, they make up for in intuition, and they're like
Mm.
bloodhounds, they sense everything, especially if you have a
Hmm.
highly sensitive child. Like my son's very sensitive, and I get very flappy when I'm traveling. And like I have to have him out of the house when I'm packing because otherwise he will just be like an absolute hot mess of tears because I'm flappy. So they definitely pick up on it. Yeah, for sure. And I think, there is a hereditary component to it. If you're anxious, your children are more likely to be. And I think as well, they say like generational trauma can go
Yeah.
like 6 generations or something. So, I mean, yeah, if you were stressed during pregnancy, your child might already be born stressed. It's not your fault. You don't need to feel bad about it. You just need to acknowledge that it's a part of you. I
Yeah.
had anxiety on and off throughout my life, and it's something I learned to manage. I know how
Mhm.
to manage those thoughts. Like the other one we get as parents is I call it the call to the void. Those thoughts, those awful thoughts you have about the
Oh,
ways your child might die,
yeah.
and I
It's
had to laugh.
horrible. It's just
Oh
stressing. I'm like,
my
oh
God.
my
And the
God,
thing is,
brain,
nobody
that's not
talks
cool.
about it. No one talks about it. And so we all think there's something wrong with me. But then when you start talking to your friends, they're like, oh my God, let me tell you about the ways my child might die. So I had this awful
Oh,
one last night. I was like just about to drift off. And then I suddenly thought, I wonder what my son would do if I crossed the road and he didn't realize I'd crossed. And so he was on the other side of the road to me. Would he run across the road and die to be with me? Probably
mm.
not. And then I imagined somebody holding him while he stood there screaming and crying for me, and thought, well, I'd have to just slowly make my way back across the road. And then I imagined that I've left the buggy on the other side and someone runs away with my baby. And I was like, oh, that's good.
Oh,
Now I'm awake. And you just think this is mad. Why would my brain throw that scenario at me? But it's normal and it's an evolutionary thing to make us stay alert to look after our kids. But like in that moment, for example, I was like, all of a sudden, my heart's beating really quickly. And I just know, like, okay, my son is asleep in his bed. My daughter is asleep in her bed. Nobody's going to cross the road in this moment. You're safe. You're fine.
yep.
And it's just about learning how to live with it.
That's so true. And telling yourself, oh no, it's actually like they're here, they're safe, this is okay. But it's so true. These intrusive thoughts are like wild. Like I have the same. Like my sister had a baby, she's like 8 weeks now, but she's like, oh my God, these thoughts back of like something happening to my baby or someone harming my baby. Oh my God, it freaks me out. I'm like, you're not
It's
alone.
no, like every time you're walking around with your baby in a carrier, you just think, what if I tripped and landed on her head all the time?
I know, yeah, I've had something similar, but it freaks you out, and it physiologically, like you feel it in your body, and you're like, okay, deep breaths, we're
Yeah,
calm, we're safe, we're okay, and it's actually just doing that in the moment. Hey, like using those tools to literally like chill you out.
yeah,
Oh, it's a wild. It's just yeah, the next level. So that's just I think something to practice too. Is it's not latching onto those thoughts. It's almost like that. So it's like an ACT, like where you're just kind of accepting
yeah,
those thoughts and being okay, they're here, but safe. That's not happening. Like
yeah.
try not to.
I think as well with anxious thoughts and with slightly older children, you can do this with them as well. That I always think about, okay, like you're imagining the worst case scenario, that's fine. You can say to your brain, thank you for helping me think about what I might do in this awful scenario. But at the moment, that is just as likely to be true as the best case scenario and the most likely scenario. So I'm going to force myself to dedicate the same amount of energy to all three possible outcomes and not just the bad one.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. It's like says, oh, what if this is going to happen? And da da da. It's like, well, what if everything goes right? What if this happens? This could be amazing if this happens. And that's so true because we have that. Is it that your brain has this like negative bias, and you kind of have to try
Yeah,
and like actively go, oh no, hang on, let's focus on the positives as well.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, good tip. Good reminder, everybody. And just going back to, I guess how we're speaking to our kids, like our words have a lot of power over our kids and what we say, like whether we're teasing them or threatening or whatever we're saying to our kids. But I read one of these posts of yours, which I loved. 6 things we should never tease our children about, and I loved this because I'm a child who's experienced a couple of these things, and it really does stick with you. Weight, appearance, shyness, singing, relationships, and intelligence. What is happening to our kids if we are doing this?
We're just sowing seeds of insecurity, really, aren't we? I mean, you know, like in general, it's, you know, and you'll see the comments of that post. So many people are like, shouldn't we just not tease our kids full stop? And it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
realistically. Just doesn't make it good an Instagram post. But I think, you know, they're just kind of seeds of doubt. And I think, you know, something like singing, like it's such a joyful experience, you know, and listening to my son sing is like one of my favorite things in the world. I don't care if he's in tune or not. I just love seeing him do something that's so natural and primitive.
Hmm.
Yeah, things like, you know, weight and appearance. And there's a really lovely saying, I don't know who it came from, that says you should never comment on something about someone they can't change in 5 minutes or less. So
Yeah.
like, you know, your shoelace is undone. Great, I can fix that. Your hair's
Hmm.
red and frizzy. What are they going to do? So just shut up, don't say it. You know, and
Yeah,
I just
exactly.
think,
Yeah.
yeah, you know, never don't sow seeds of self-doubt in your children. Like life can be hard. Be their cheerleader.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well said. And yeah, I think I've seen this same one you're talking about. Some an American girl teacher, I think, and she's like, if you they can't change it in 30 seconds or less, and then she's got this
Mhm.
like toothpaste tube of all this, like she's squeezing it out, like, and they're trying to like literally put that stuff back in. It's like, no, no, your words are out there now. They've heard it. You can't take it back. You
Yeah.
can't put it back in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that that's awesome. Be kind. I think kindness. We just need to raise a new generation of kids who are just kind to themselves and kind to other people.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say to my son, like, if I say to him, in a world where you can be anything, he will either say, be kind or be yourself. Um,
Mm.
and like those are kind of like what I was saying to my husband, like, you know, we should have like a family like motto, like what do we stand for? So we kind of have like always be yourself, always be kind, and don't be boring.
Yeah, I love that. And the don't be boring part, I'm like, live it up. Let your freak flag fly, man. Like, just be
Exactly.
you.
Like it might sound a bit judgmental, and it's, you know, it's one that works for our family because me and my husband were never mainstream kids when we were younger. But yeah, I just remember when my son started nursery, and I kind of looked around at all the other mums and I was like, oh God, it's like they've all just given up. Like, really? Well, like, why are you all just wearing leggings and a big jumper? Let's like, don't lose yourself.
Amen to that. Yeah, I love that you said that actually, because the mum and I went to a dance class on Sunday. I was like, oh my God, this girl is my vibe. Where are the rest of the women like this who just want to get out and move their ass, like have a dance, like shake this shit off, like just enjoy themselves?
Exactly. Yeah. So like sometimes my son's like, Mum, can we be odd sock guys? And like all of us will wear odd socks, including the baby. Or like he'll say to me, like, Mummy, are you also wearing your red t-shirt and blue shorts? And like look at me and I'm like, is that because it's what you want to wear and you want me to wear the same? He's like, yeah, I'm like, great, I'm in. I just,
Suits.
yeah.
Oh my God, I love that. Oh, and that authenticity. Yes, we have to just, even if we're uncomfortable with things, like even if it's choosing clothes and like my kid wants to wear that, like my daughter doesn't like brushing her hair. I'm like, if you don't want to brush your hair for 3 days, that's your choice. I'm not going to fight you.
Exactly. Yeah, pick your battles wisely.
Yeah, I think you got to let go of a little bit of what you think other people are thinking about you. It's like you just got to
Yeah.
let that shit
And
go.
that I think is one of the most important things we can teach our kids. And like my son the other day, he was saying, like he's learning how to write, and he was saying, you know, that his writing wasn't very good and he cried. And I said, oh, what were your tears about? And he said, I was worried other people would be embarrassed of me. And I was like, do you mean you were embarrassed that you were crying about your writing, or you were worried you should be embarrassed about your writing? And he said, I was worried people would I was embarrassed that I was crying about it. And I was like, well, your writing really mattered to you, and that's a good thing. And I said to him, but did you think your writing was bad? And he was like, no. And I was like, okay, so what matters more, the voice inside or the voice of the people outside? He was like, the voice inside. And I was like, great. And I think, you know, that kind of whole thought process came about because we were walking along one day and my husband said to my son, you know, one of mummy's superpowers is she doesn't care what anyone thinks about her. And I was like, is that how I feel? And I was like, I don't think that's true, because if I didn't care, then I could just be rude to people without thinking about it. It's that I
Mm.
don't believe what other people say about me more than what I believe about myself. So if somebody said to me like, oh, you've got really silly hair, then I'd think, do I? No, I don't think I do. And I wouldn't believe them instead of myself. So teaching your children about that voice that they have inside of them, and like what are the words that they can say to themselves to kind of create a shield.
Shield, yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. And I just think, yeah, reminding of that inner voice, like that's more important. I think that's something that almost needs to be talked about more in schools, because I feel like I've done some parent help with my youngest, in her class, and just I think some of the ways that old school teachers communicate with the kids, and they're constantly trying to correct their writing and things. And you can just see the look that just like it's like they sink in their chest, and you can see in their body language that like are they just like chipping away at their self-esteem in the way they talk to them sometimes. Some of them are great, but like just being able to be patient with them and like, oh, that really meant a lot to you, like you were just saying. Like I just feel like something in the school system needs to change. Like, would you
It
agree?
does. I mean, like we know that the best school system is the Danish one, and where they don't
Mm,
start literacy and numeracy until they're like 7. You know, no one puts a pen in a Danish kid's hand until they're 7 years old. And there are so
wow.
many reasons for that, not just to do with their brain development, but also actually the muscular development of your hand. Like you don't have the muscles in your hand. And for children to sit upright, that takes actual cognitive awareness. They are actively sitting upright. It's not a byproduct. They're not doing it inherently. So you're asking a
Yes.
child to look at symbols, decipher meaning of them, put those sounds together, create the word, understand the word, and then do the same with the next one, and then extract information from that. And it's just
Mm,
developmental mad. Like, I don't understand
yeah.
why we have all of this information about developmental and educational psychology and nothing changes, because they've shown it's absolutely unequivocal
Mm,
that there is zero benefit to starting children on literacy and numeracy at 4 years old like they do here versus
mm,
starting, because by the age of 11 they are all exactly the same, but the kids that start at 7 have better comprehension because they are not working so hard to extract information from what they're reading. And I remember as a kid I was brilliant at reading aloud, but then ask me what I'd read and I'd be like, don't know.
what? Oh my
Yeah.
God. And like I say, we have all that information, we're not changing anything.
No.
God, no wonder our kids are absolutely fried by like day 3 or 4 of their week. I'm
Exactly.
like, what's happening? And I feel like there's just, yeah, the expectations on the kids, like all of us parents are talking about it. So I just feel like
Yeah.
they're expecting so much from these kids at such a young age. Like it's concerning.
Yeah. Yeah, like so in England, compulsory school age is 5, and you can obviously homeschool.
Mm,
But my son was what's called rising 5 here, so he was 4.5 when he started.
wow.
Technically, I could have held him back a year, but I think that if he'd have then started with the 4-year-olds the following year, he would have been really bored. So I
Mm,
decided to go. But I said to his head teacher before he started, his baby sister is due as soon as he starts school. So actually, for the first 6 months until he's 5, I'm going to pick him up at lunchtime 3 days a week. And some schools here say, like, oh no, that would be marked as an unauthorized absence. But that's actually the head teacher's choice because they could just authorize the absence. Unfortunately, our head teacher was lovely and he was like, look, I've got kids. Like, once they're at school, like, you don't get as much of them. So as long as he's okay, then, like, sure. So that's what I did with my son for the first 7 weeks. So the first half term and then maybe a bit after. And then one day I went to collect him and he was like, why are you picking me up? I want to stay. And I let him settle in his own time. But it's absolutely insane to me that the government decides once they turn 5 what is right for them. And I have no say in that. So, I mean, apologies to my son's teacher, but he does zero practice outside of school. Like, if you can't learn it in school, he's definitely not learning it once he comes home.
absolutely. I agree with that. And well done for advocating for him.
Mm.
That's awesome. And it just, yeah, I think that's such a good idea that you did that. And just,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
People don't know
no,
you
good on
can
you.
do it. Parents don't have any idea because the government don't want anyone to know it, but it's just fact. Like legally, they can't do anything.
Oh, there you go, everybody. So if you want to
Yeah,
take them out a bit earlier, a few days a week, why not? Go ahead and do it.
yeah,
And like like I say, once they're at school full time, it's like
yeah,
at that bit older, that's it. They're there more than what they are here, really.
yeah,
Which is
exactly.
kind of scary.
Mm.
I did have a question. I was just going to circle back to with the anxious child, what to say to them. But what can we do if our kid is being bullied? Like, how would we approach that, I guess, with our child?
Mm. So I think I would start with that kind of what we were just talking about, really. What are the words that they can
Mm.
say to themselves in that moment?
Yep.
It depends on, how extreme it is, but I think with some of the kids I've worked with who've had a bit of bullying, I've done some role play with them. So like, okay, when this kid comes to you and says like, your ears stick out, what could you say? Like, what would happen if you just went, okay.
Yeah, just okay, that's what you think, but whatever, moving on.
Yeah, and then they're like, oh, and actually sometimes actually helping them just have a response prepared really empowers them. And you can think about the physicality. So like, like what's your favorite superhero? How might they stand? Can you stand that way with your chest really proud and your feet really firm and be like, great, that's what you think. Next, have you got anything else? And
Love
obviously,
that.
if it's something that needs to be managed at school, then I would, absolutely, as much as your child begs you to not get school involved, like you can't send them into a school that aren't looking after them. Um,
Hmm.
in an ideal world, it's not often something you can request, but you could ask is about having the other parents and their kid in the same room so you can all have a conversation about what's going on and try and hear both sides of things. And then if it's
Mm.
really unpleasant for your kid at break time or something, then I would say, okay, like if he wants to stay inside with the teacher during break time, can you facilitate that? Because schools
Hmm.
typically you can't ask them for anything, it's going to cost them extra money, but they all have paper and pens and stuff in the class, and typically a teacher will be in there marking homework and stuff. So you can realistically ask for them to be able to stay inside if they want to.
Mm. Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah. So hope that there's an option like that there if they don't want to be out there with
Mm.
other kids. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Um, so this leads into this last question, I guess. There's some tips there already, but how can we empower our children to boost their confidence, self-esteem, and their sense of self?
I think it comes from just supporting them in exactly who they are, never trying to force them to be someone that they're not, not chipping away at their self-esteem. I think undermining their decisions can be a big one. And often
Mm.
that comes from like little inadvertent things we don't always think about. So, like for example, if you've got a kid that always scooters or cycles or runs ahead of you, and you keep saying to them, "Don't run away from me," you're not actually telling them
Mm.
what they can do. And young kids under the age of kind of 7, they can't really infer. So if you tell children what they can do, and you
Mm.
give them choices, then they start to feel like I'm good at making decisions. Whereas if all they hear is don't do this, stop this, stop that, careful, careful, then they just think, oh my
Mm.
God, I'm terrible at making decisions. Um, there's a kind
Yep.
of saying which says, never do for a child what they can do for themselves. So
Hmm.
sometimes I think, kids have moments where they want to be babied and they're like, Mummy, will you help me get dressed? And I would always say yes. But in general, like once they start being able to dress themselves, get them to dress themselves.
Yep.
Um, reflect to them when they make good choices, about how brilliant they are at making good decisions.
Hmm.
And in those moments where it could be a negative moment, how can you turn it around? So when you've got, two kids that are fighting, if they're squabbling over the same toy, to kind of take the toy and be like, right, I've got it now. Okay, you guys are really, really bright children. Can you guys think of a way that you could both play with this? And then listen to their ideas and then be like, oh my God, I knew you guys could do it. You are so smart. Instead of having a go at them for what they've been doing, find a way to celebrate what they can do and ask them the questions that they need to ask themselves one day. Um, so yeah, I think that's kind of the heart of how you raise a kid who knows themselves. It's about taking those moments to reflect at them, the wonderful things that they are. And like just those little
Yep.
things. Like I was in bed with my son the other night and I was kind of lying with him and I just said to him, like, I love you so much. And I'm so proud of what an amazing big brother you are. And I'm so proud of what an amazing friend you are. And there is nothing you could ever say or do that would ever make me love you less. And I just think, like, shouldn't all children grow up hearing that?
And every day. We tell our kids that
Mhm.
often too. Same thing. I'm so proud of you just for who you are
Yeah.
and like say what they can do. Not constantly saying don't. They hear that enough at school as well. But like say
Yeah.
reflecting and focus on things they can do. Yeah, I love that. And telling them that like we say that to Abby a lot actually now, or both of them the girls, but Abby and I have our little chats like right before bed.
Mm.
So after school, you ask them questions and like, oh, do you have to ask me right now? And I'm like, oh, sorry, okay, just I've been talking all day. So I'm like, okay, I'll give you time. When's a good time? Bedtime. Okay. We'll sit there and have a little chat and she'll tell me about her day. And Same thing, we're just like, we're so lucky to be your parents. Like, we're so proud of you for who you are. Like, just little things like that, reminding them. Because that's that little voice in their head, hey, as they get that bit older. So what are they saying to themselves? Like, what are they thinking? Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
really, really important. Love that. That's awesome. So where can people reach you? Please share.
So you can find me on Instagram, it's the therapy shed with a stop between each one. So the stop therapy stop shed. And on there's a link to my website and also my new guide that I just released. It's the first time I've done something like this, a 40-page PDF on managing tantrums. So like everything I could think of on managing tantrums, including your triggers as a parent and those words that you need to say to yourself. So you can find all of it on there.
Awesome. I'll have to check that one out. So that must have been
Great.
really recent then, like just the last
Yeah.
couple of weeks.
Yeah, a couple of days ago. Yeah.
Done. So exciting.
Yeah.
I'll check it out to get it for my sister when this little bub grows up a bit.
Definitely.
Here's your Christmas present. um, cool. So I'd just like to finish the episode just with a few more personal questions and then just some of your final words you'd like to share with the audience. Yeah, so what is, just to remind the amazing, incredible women that come on this podcast, how awesome they are. What is one thing that you love about yourself?
I love my ability to stand up for myself and the people I love.
Awesome. That really shines through too. I can see that. Good on you. What is one thing you do that lights you up?
Running, singing, probably those two things, yeah.
Nice. Do you sing like professionally or more like at home in the
I
shower kind
used
of
to in
singing?
a former life, I did musical theatre, so I do love singing. Yeah, so like now it's only to myself, but just that feeling of singing is just amazing.
Expressive therapy, singing. It's just feels good. Hey,
Yeah.
love it. Love it. If you could change anything, what would it be?
In the world or about myself? Anything. Oh my God. That's such a
No,
huge question for
not
me.
yourself. Yeah, like just,
Okay, well, instead of going like world peace, I'm just gonna go with the education system.
I've had that on the podcast as well. Just scrunched it up, throw it in the bin, start
Yeah.
again.
Because if we had children that didn't have to start school so young and parents who were supported in being able to be with their children for longer, there would be less people in prison in 30 years' time, I'm sure of it. So let's start there.
Yep, absolutely. I agree. Right on. What are you most grateful for?
Oh God. Being born into the place and family that I was that gave me all the opportunities I've had.
Love it. Beautiful. And if you could say one last thing to our audience, what would it be?
That there is no such thing as a perfect parent. There is just no such thing as perfect. So don't aim for something that doesn't exist. Try and be the best version of yourself and accept that that looks different on different days. And I guess I often say, like, there is no such thing as a perfect parent, but if there was, it would be one that sometimes fucked up, apologized, and then moved on and tried to improve again.
I love that. There's definitely no perfect parent. Oh, well said. And it's just all about that. Yeah. Witness it, repair, and keep moving forward. Hey.
Yeah, exactly.
Love it. Oh, thanks so much for coming on, Zara. I really appreciate you coming on and spending time with us and sharing your wisdom and knowledge. It's amazing. Thanks so much.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.